Hello and welcome to Leading Dragons. And we are today, this is our last of a series of 5 of leadership training during the Corona times. Good evening, good morning to Hawaii, good morning to Casey. How are you?
Good evening and good morning, Deborah. Doing really well. Glad to be here. And so today we're going to talk about closure and how we close through the pandemic times and come out the other side. So Deborah, would you like to start?
Yeah, well, we were just before I hit the record button, we were talking about, wow, so this is closure. And we're going to see where today's session takes us, given it has been a little journey together. And I was saying how I don't feel that people are still talking about the Corona times as such since the breakout of the pandemic in March 2020. And we're kind of like really moving in. We can't talk about post-pandemic just yet, although I do know that some people and some corporations and institutions are talking about post-pandemic. But I see it more like a hybrid space that we're in right now,
Mm-hmm.
which perfectly reflects and sums up the teachings, Casey, that you brought to this series of leadership training.
Okay, let's dive in. Now, are we done with the pandemic? No. The pandemic is still going to play out over the next few years. So we are at a closure point in the sense that in the West, we're reaching a point where we're coming to a point where, okay, we understand what this pandemic looks like. We are creating new structures. And so we're ready to move beyond the pandemic. Pandemic will not end overnight. It's going to play out for several more years easily. India is going through a massive burst again. Brazil is going through a massive burst. South America is expanding. Asia is expanding it out again.
Mm-hmm.
The mutation rate of the pandemic is such that the vaccination process won't keep it quite under control. That's been established now. So we know there's a new normal up ahead. We're beginning to normalize, get used to business as normal in pandemic. And we're entering a new normal, but it's not going to look like anything in the past.
So,
Okay.
what is
So
normal?
that's what we need to talk about, the new normal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, and one of the predictions I made based on the pandemic and other things is up ahead, we will see a constriction of global movement. Okay. Um, for various reasons, nationalism, fear of spreading the virus, and other reasons. So, like the tourist based economy is going to switch into something very different up ahead. The international travel economy is going to switch into something very different ahead. And we're seeing signs of that finally happening. For instance, in Australia, they made it if you're Australian coming back from India to Australia without permission, it's a $60,000 fine and up to 5 years in jail. Okay, big deal.
Yeah.
So look at New Zealand, totally closed everything down. Look at the restriction bubbles. Those restriction bubbles, because of the various mutation rates and stuff like that, are not going to go away. In fact, they're going to accelerate, just as they are accelerating in Australia right now. So that tells us the landscape of international business is going to shift quite a bit. Okay, that tells us the new normal does not look like what it did before. Okay, so one of the things we do have to factor in is we need to get used to distributed workforces. We need to get used to working from home. We need to get used to um, a different distribution of work. Okay, so that's something we're going to have to evolve to, and it's not going to settle down today. It's going to settle down over the next few years. So we have time to evolve with it as it evolves. That's good. Now, the second thing I'm going to point out is a deeper truth. The way the modern corporate society works came out around the 1800s from the railroad system.
Mm-hmm.
So when you got these monolithic railroad systems of railroad that crossed nations even and across thousands of miles, it needed a new type of structure to run that type of business. So today's monolithic business structure actually is directly related to this monolithic railroad structure that was created to maintain vast networks of movement and resources through the railroad system. So the railroad system of working in this very tiered system came out of the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
And for most of this century, last century, that's the way big business was done. And so it wasn't very distributed. It was very much this tree network of a pyramid where the network was set up and very organized, very rigid, but it worked.
Mm-hmm.
So that system of 150 years is finally reaching its endpoint. It won't go away. There's still going to be some structures that will use that massive pyramid of business structure. But it's beginning to be blown apart into a new distributed network of doing business. Over the last 25 years, it's been evolving. Like I became a distributed worker back in 95, where I was working from home even 25 years ago. And so this has been evolving for the last 25 years, but it's finally reached the point where it's becoming mainstream. So this new distributed model is not going to go away. So what we're going to see is in the business marketplace, we're still going to see that railroad monolithic tiered structure out there quite a bit. And if you're a person that fits into that, you need to find that structure and fit into it, because some people really fit into that structure really well, and they will not do very well in a distributed network. Likewise, for the people who are more distributed, who are more interconnected, go into this new model. Don't try to merge the two models together. They're very different. Okay. There might be some hybrids out there where they're both monolithic with pockets of distributed. I know companies like Google who have tried that, and other companies that I worked with that have tried it, and it doesn't work as well as you think it will. Is it possible to implement a merged system? Some cases, yes, but you have to be careful. So the point is, as we move into this new distributed world of post-COVID, because it's not going to go back to pre-COVID,
Mm-hmm.
understand who you are as a business manager. Are you a person who wants to be working distributed? If so, make sure you move that way. Are you a person who needs the structure of that traditional pyramid? If so, move that way. Because both of them are going to be side by side for the future, because they both have their places now. But this new distributed model is not going to go away. Go ahead.
So you're saying that basically these hierarchical structures aren't going away anytime soon. So maybe some of them will flatten, but some of them will still be standing strong and tall. And my question to you is, how can you be so certain? And isn't there a collective consciousness, a collective, on a global scale, this kind of fed upness, this enough is enough, and we want to move away from this sort of traditionally capitalist system into more circular systems?
Okay, good question. As our society evolves, once something has evolved and proved itself, it doesn't go away. It may diminish, but it doesn't go away.
Mm.
I'll give you an example. We started off as a species being tribal. Tribal worked really well as a form of social integrity. 150 people were roaming in a tribe. But at some point, as a species, we also evolved to be living in city states, where the state was based on a city. At some point, when communication improved and new models of communication came into place, the city state got supplanted by the nation state. But does that mean the city state doesn't exist? Actually, it still does. Singapore, example of a city state still alive today.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the world is not living in a city state. It's a merger of city states with nation states merging together. But the city state did not go away. But the city state doesn't support the national global model very well. So you have this global system evolving too. So just because the pyramid evolved back in the 1800s to support the railroad system doesn't mean it's going to go away. It has its place, but it won't be everywhere either.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to acknowledge, while the pyramid side system will probably diminish in size, it's not going to diminish as fast as the people who are distributed would like it to. I remember back in the 90s and we're talking about distributed, and everyone's like, yeah, this old model is going to go away. And I'm like, no, and it really hasn't gone away because it has its place.
Mhm.
So it's more acknowledging where it fits and working with it.
Or where you
So,
fit in it.
well, that's our challenge. Where do we fit in it? And acknowledge, are you more the traditional model? If you are, there's nothing wrong with working with that.
Yeah.
There are going to be a lot of places that come back together after COVID because a lot of people miss working in the office because it gave them a chance to get out of the home. A lot of people liked having that two-tier life, work life versus personal life.
Mm.
And so for some people, they're going to go back to it. So we're going to see both a resurgence of the distributed model and the pyramid because a lot of people are going to go back to it because they're going to miss it.
Can we talk about new rules of thumb? So, for instance, people who are going back. We talked just earlier on about hybrid ways of working. Um, maybe we'll spend 50% of the time in the office and 50% will be working remotely, for instance. But if we go back to, if given the change, the rate of change is accelerating and going quicker, faster and faster, and we're needing to innovate, and to reinvent ourselves in the workplace. And so, if we were to keep these very tall hierarchical structures inside organizations, that's going to be more, I imagine, more of a disservice to us than a service to us who today are faced with this accelerating change. And so we're going to have product life cycles, service life cycles that need to be changing at a faster rate. And if we were to have all these governance levels, half of which are more of a disservice than they are of a service, aren't we going to be seeing at least a flattening of those hierarchical structures?
No. I'll use Samsung as an example.
Mm-hmm.
Look at what Samsung does in Korea. If you have a dishwasher, who built it? Samsung. If you have a cell phone, who built it? Samsung. If you have a car, who built it? Samsung. If you have internet service, who provides it? Okay. So the fact is, you have this monolithic company in Korea, Samsung, that provides a huge range of services, far more than a Western corporation does. And it's far more integrated, and that's not going to go away.
Mm.
There will be pockets that arise from it, but it works for them. And so the fact is, a lot of these structures are not going to go away. It's more knowing where you fit in.
Yeah.
Some people really need that. And so if you're a person that needs it, you're going to have to find it. But you know what the limiting characteristic will be? Transportation. As the car network changes, as the transportation network changes, you need a transportation network to support those type of structures. And so as the transportation system changes over the next 50 years, that's going to be the bigger impact to those organizations in COVID, quite honestly. Because if your workers can't get to your centralized point, there is no centralized system. So the fact is, there's a lot of evolution that's going to have to happen over the next 20, 30, 50 years. And that's bigger than us because we live shorter lifespans. That is evolving. But you can see some of those monolithic cross nation states are going to be impacted because what's happening right now, those travel restrictions aren't going to go away, or they're going to tighten down, or you're going to get travel bubbles. Singapore, Hong Kong, Malaysia, and you have this travel bubble. And so you're going to have new structures that will arise in these travel bubbles. It will reinforce Europe, for instance.
Are these travel bubbles that are defined as on the back of COVID measures? Is that right?
Yeah, and so that's going to impact the state of corporations working internationally quite a bit. And so over the last few years with my international corporation customers, actually I have been recommending and they have been pulling back from areas. And fortunately, because we were doing that before COVID, when COVID hit, they were ready for it. Mm-hmm. And COVID's going to exacerbate that problem, quite honestly. So we're living interesting for us, being small, we are able to adapt faster than the corporations. So it's up to us to be smart to recognize where we fit in and work to it. Just because we are more distributed doesn't mean we want to say it's the end of the pyramid, because it's not. Pyramids are highly stable structures. If you go to Egypt, which buildings lasted 5,000 years? The pyramids. Very stable structure. It withstands erosion. It's not going to go away anytime soon. Structure, social systems based on pyramids are very stable, it turns out. That's why people keep using them. Okay, they're not going to go away fast.
Well,
So again,
it goes back
acknowledge
to,
where you're at.
it's also the tribal organigram. You have a tribes self-organize,
Mhm.
typically with a chief. And we have a chief, we have at the head of tribes. Or does that,
Well,
I don't know.
believe it or not, not necessarily. A tribe can be more distributed than you realize. If you look at the Bushmen in Africa or in the Amazon, those tribes are much more distributed than Americans realize or Westerners realize.
Mhm.
And the power structure is more fluid than Westerners realize. Yes, you can have chieftains at times who consolidate the power, but you also have times when it's very fluid and the tribal members can move around more than you realize. It's case by case.
Mhm.
So at times, tribes can be very tight, and times they can be very loose. But that brings up a good point. Distributed works really well at the tribal scale level.
Okay.
Distributed doesn't work as well at the bigger levels.
Yeah.
So for instance, if you want to make a large scale distributed company, you want a tribe of tribes. You want the company to be 150 smaller tribes, which are distributed. So 150 times 150, what do you get? Oh, that's not. So our nature supports tribe. We're wired for tribal level work, unfortunately. That's why the pyramid works so well, because it kind of gives a structure for us to work together still. Because on average, we're wired to work with 150 people. So if you look at those big structures, they actually are subcategorized down to work with that nature. So if we're going to work distributedly, we have to acknowledge that too, that there's probably going to be a scaling limit to distributed, and we want to make distributed, ironically enough. This not this vast network of distributor where anyone can work with everyone. It's going to be a little bit loose. It's going to be tribal and distributed at the same time. Now that's kind of a abstract concept.
Mhm.
It does work. When I work in that case, it works well. And likewise, when you try to add distributed to the pyramid, it only works for selected projects where you need the distributed model to do the project, and then you let it be reabsorbed back into the pyramid. So keep going.
We're going, we're really expanding out here, and I'm not sure where this is, where, you know, where we're going, which way we're going right now. And I'm just thinking, like, if we were supposed to bring it back down to on a human level, because for me, what I'm fascinated in is how organizations can shift their leadership in order to bring the human not back, into the center of everything that they do. And so this is kind of, I don't know if it's because of, you know, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Is it because of the pandemic, or is it something that started? We was also talked about generations, didn't we, in our previous podcast, Casey, when we were talking about, you know, you had the boomers, and then you had the Gen Yers, and then we've got the is that right? The X, the Ys, and
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 disease.
and just how they want to be working and how they want to be living their life and building their career. So
Right.
there's so many system pulls, so many different system pulls, and things that you know, that are within our circle of influence and those which are completely not. And in this array of confusion and changes and uncertainty and an ever-changing landscape, I'd like to go back to, you know, what is it to be a leading dragon, and why we need to have more leading dragons
So,
in leadership positions.
so in conclusion, the reason I went here is the following. As leading dragons, we're probably going to be the people who are called to this particular series are going to be probably the more distributed people, the people who see the power of being distributed, the power of working together across a more loose network. And so the first conclusion I'm giving is,
Oh, we
yes.
can't hear you now,
Oh,
Casey. There
one
we go.
second.
Yeah.
Okay, so the reason I went here is to give a heads up to those people who are distributed to not think the world is going distributed, because it's a direction the world is heading towards, but the old system is still going to be there. And so we have to acknowledge both sides of the coin, both the more traditional model and the newer model. You have to acknowledge which side you are. The Gen Zers, the Gen Xers, in other words, the millennials and the new generation are more distributed than ever before. They've been growing up in this stuff. So because our younger generation's been growing up, they know how to work distributedly because they live distributedly now more and more. I have 3 children and I'm watching them. They're all distributed, right? So the new generations are becoming more so distributed, which means that's going to keep growing. And for us, we can't assume that's the future. It's just one part of the future. And if that's where we fit in, go there. But don't try to overforce it, because if you do, you'll quickly discover it doesn't fit everywhere. And you quickly will discover there are people that doesn't work with. And you quickly will discover some people will attack you for it because it'll make them uncomfortable. So again, it's acknowledging there is this change and we want to work with it, but don't get myopic and think that's the only thing that's happening. Because it isn't. And you have to know your place in this model. And generally speaking, as people get older, they like pyramids more, it turns out, because they like stability. They don't want a chaotic mix. And so the pyramid will always have its place in the business model in the modern world, it turns out.
Yeah,
And so
it's, yeah, keep.
So if we're working this way, we have to acknowledge that and interface with it in a way that we provide quickness and innovation, which we are a part of, and we need to interface with that stable structure too, for base, for selling structures too. And so it's a back and forth process. Don't jump into the new world only because the new world isn't just the new world. It's some of the old world will always be around us. We always will have to interface with it. So as dragons, dragon leaders, we need to recognize that. And it's our job to be the bridge. Because our distributed workers will want to stay distributed, but they may not interface very well with the pyramids. And now will be our job to interface with the pyramids to provide the base to do that. And when we're interfacing with the pyramid, we have to be careful we don't become the pyramid, because if we become the pyramid, our distributed workers will be pissed at us and walk away from us.
Yeah, so being the bridge and bridging the best of both worlds as we create this, yeah, like this hybrid,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So you know, as I mean, this is so the leading dragon who has to stand up in the face of many adversity and decide to move forward and experiment and explore. And because it's not by reading, you know, all the books on the planet that we're going to get the answers. It's only by applying and just walking through that fear, harnessing the fear, and stepping into our power and making decisions, collective decisions. And I think that it goes back to that, isn't it? Is it, as a leading dragon, it's also very much around the collective. So find it, you know, collective intelligence, leveraging that with the group, collective accountability, collective design thinking, collective solutions. So, and I guess this is where I see the leading dragon more as a catalyst than anything else.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that statement. And just working with it, acknowledge it, and don't try to make it one or the other, but work with both sides. Be the bridge.
Yeah.
And one of the traps is, as COVID seemingly closes down, we're going to want to either go back to the old model or only into the new model. And we don't realize COVID's not done winding down. And that's going to force things for the next few years more than we realize. We can't just assume COVID's going to wind down in 6 months. It's not. It's going to be a reality for the next few years and probably longer. So the new normal is evolving right now as we speak. And I'm watching the trends. I'm watching all these, where was it I drove by? I drove by this one place and it was this upscale neighborhood on the other side of the island where billionaires lived and all this. And I was walking through the mall that serviced this rich clientele, and half the stores were closed. That whole economic churn was shut down still by COVID, even though our island's very impacted very little by COVID, relatively speaking. And that's not going to go away. It felt like I was walking through a ghost town.
Yeah.
And I was looking at this and going, that's going to take several years for that to settle back out. And I was reading about how there's this whole, workforces, try and bring the workers back and can't and can, and it's going to take a while to still sort out. It's leading dragon. We need to be able to bridge that difference because it's not over and it's going to take several years to sort through. And it's going to be a very different beast than we expect, quite honestly.
So this is like the hybrid window, and I was saying it's like those old cameras, the Polaroid cameras, and how from the breakout of the pandemic, obviously nothing that anyone ever expected was prepared for. The bright side is that it was like as if it was everyone was given that opportunity to stop, and the Polaroid camera took a snapshot of each one of us around the whole world to see where we're at in our lives at that given time. And it's like, okay, so Casey, this is a snapshot of you today. This is where you live. This is how you spend your time. This is where you are, who you're with, how you invest, how you go about your everyday life, how you're looking after yourself, and are you happy with it? And I think this has really brought about so much collective consciousness around just everything that we do, the society that we've grown up in, the norms that we're used to, and question so much. And it has really sparked a lot of critical thinking around that. And it's like there's not even any more hiding now because everyone's got that Polaroid picture of themselves. And it's like, you know what? There's no more hiding. I've recently started rowing. I'm learning to row on the lake nearby. And I was saying it's fascinating how we're four in a boat, four rowers. There's no hiding in the boat. You see the person for their true colors. And it's just like this, never-ending prolonged pandemic and the measures and the confinements and the lockdowns and the curfews and all the rest of it. And that Polaroid is just like staring at us in the face, going, is this the legacy that you want to leave behind? And even before talking about legacy, is this how you want to spend the rest of your life? And are you on the right track? And so with all this, being a bridge to, the old infrastructures, the oldish, the ones that are still standing, and the new ones that are being built or are not being built yet. And as a leading dragon, I guess the question comes right down to, okay, so what do I want to do as a leading dragon today? How do I want to, am I best at being a bridge? Or is there something else where I would be able to serve better? And I guess it goes back to connecting with self.
I would agree with that. And people being people, they tend to hunker down and wait for things to happen. And so after a year of hunkering down, the truth is you can't wait for the solution to come to you. You have to choose what works for you and build it, work with it, live to it now, because it's not going to stop. So you can't outwait the COVID pandemic anymore. You have to work with it and grow from it now. There's no more waiting to see what's happening. We have enough information to make our choices. And so do so. Live more as your leader or as who you want, what you envision, and make it happen. Don't try to change the whole world. Change what you're connected to.
Starting with self.
Self, and then your business, and then your connections from your business. Yes. This is
Mm.
all three.
Yeah, and this goes back to well, I mean, we've been talking about conscious leadership now for about 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
and personally, until I went on my personal journey on the back of burnout, I didn't actually really understand on a cellular level what conscious leadership was really about. And I think, and I know, and I do cat now that I've integrated it on a cellular level, and I catch people glossing over their words. I'll stop them and go, you do realize that's a huge statement that you've made right there. You know, something as simple as, oh, you know, I'm taking full ownership of, you know, whatever, my career.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm empowering my team. It's like, that's fast. That's a huge, you know, that's a big thing. You know, you're empowering your team. You know, tell me more. Yeah.
So let me give you another analogy here. As you said, you were learning conscious leadership for 20 years, but it took your burnout to wake you up to understand what it really meant. And the truth is, our society hasn't burnt out yet. It hasn't reached that aha point. COVID is its burnout point. COVID is burning out modern society. And there are going to be a lot of people who learn from this and go, it's my time to change.
Mm.
And it's not going to change back to what we had. It's time to change into something new. The 1 year of COVID has done more damage than the worst 20 years of the 20th century of natural disasters. Economically, COVID
Economically.
is, yes, economically, COVID in 1 year has done more damage than 20 years of natural disasters in the 20th century. So that was an interesting article to see that stat. So that tells us we are in a burnout stage of our culture when it comes to business because of that economic. There's going to be a lot of breakdowns from that. There's going to be a lot. So this year, and as you know, as I helped you work through your burnout, that wasn't a single day or a month process. That is a year-long, 2-year-long process. Likewise, for our society to work through this burnout, it's not going to be a year-long process. It's going to take a while for it to come through the other side.
Mm.
And we are part of that healing process. We are part of that process of slowly working with these changes to make it ours and be part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And no one's going to give us the plan to do it because it's new, because it's post burnout. So this is the post-COVID burnout. Even though COVID is still happening, we are now post-COVID burnout. And that's why this is time to act on it. Because even though COVID's still happening, the burnout has already happened.
Mm-hmm.
And people are trying to wake up. So now is the time to slowly, over the next year, come into our power, help each other, build new businesses, and be successful with that.
Mm.
And
And
that's the conclusion.
yeah, that's no, that's beautiful conclusion, Casey. And I guess the essence, or at least one of the essences of being a leading dragon is to work and to be courageous, be a courageous leader, and that starts by actually looking at things as looking at the reality, not trying to go like this, you know, hunker down, like put your
Mhm.
blinders on, like no, I haven't seen anything. Let's just pretend everything's perfectly normal, or I'll just wait for the storm to pass. Um, it's actually no. You know what? There is no storm. There's transformation happening,
Yes.
and if we put it away in the cupboard and say, oh no, let's just treat that as taboo, or there's stigma attached to it, that's just going to stifle and slow down the growth process. And I guess so. So would you say that, you know, being, I mean, a leading dragon, probably one of the first things is to recognize and accept the changes that are there unfolding in front of us,
Hmm. And work with them.
and work with
Don't wait for it to come back to what it was, but work with the new and push through that.
them.
Because as COVID continues to burn through the system, that's going to keep undercutting the old pyramids. The pyramids are not going to go away. In fact, they're going to hoover up more people now than ever. As people get desperate, the pyramids are going to hoover up a lot of people and suck them into the system because people are desperate and they're going to need. So the pyramids aren't going to get smaller as much as more distributed systems are going to evolve. Some pyramids are going to go away. Yes, some of the corporations are not going to survive this time. That's always the case in any transition point. The winners and losers. So there are going to be a lot of the pyramids that go out of business. Look at Sears, gone. Look at GE, not a good place
Yeah.
to be. Okay, so a lot of the older systems are already models, they're already gone. They just don't know it yet. But a lot of them are going to survive and pick up the pieces too. So we can't ignore them. But we can begin building these more graceful distributed networks of workplaces and be part of that too. They have their place now.
But I think the question also comes around to, okay, so what will, no, first of all, will there be a new definition of success?
Yes, that's why we're building now. This as it took 50 to 50 years for that railroad model of the pyramid to be developed to support the railroad system. That didn't evolve overnight. This new distributed model there's going to be more than one distributed model, and it's not going to develop in 6 months. Now, I've been doing this for 20 years. It's already been in process in open source software and other things I've been part of. So distributed processes have been in place for a while. They just weren't mainstream necessarily. But the COVID experience is going to make more of them mainstream finally. And so there is opportunity for us to work with that.
But we're still going to have the mega rich, and and still this kind of this. I mean, I call it the unsustainable way of working. I mean, I was just reading the other day about Elon Musk.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he's a genius. Okay, he thinks. I mean, he does his own thing. He's got 5 boys, I think, and he brags about working 80-hour weeks. And okay, he's got SpaceX and he's got Tesla, but I'm thinking like, wow, seriously, like, and obviously it's about notoriety. It's about being even better and having his own kingdom, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, really, like, how many Elon Musks are we going to see that are going to be popping up now? Or is he actually one of the last ones because people are going to be like, no, actually, this 80-hour week stuff, no, this is not the definition of success.
And again, that because a lot of people see that, they're not going to want to go to it, and it's going to give more room for these new systems to arise. But the old ones, Elon Musk's not going to go away. His wealth is not going to go away. He's going to evolve it into bigger systems. So both are going to be there for a while.
Yeah.
But remember this, when the asteroid hit the dinosaurs, which survived in the end? The dinosaurs or the little rats? The little rats. So the distributed place has its place.
Were there rats at the time of dinosaurs?
Rodent-like mammals, yeah.
Oh, right, yeah.
They're the smaller mammals were the ones that survived it.
Yeah.
But the trouble is, this is not an asteroid level extinction event necessarily. Again, that's a different topic altogether. But initially, those larger structures are not going to go away because they provide protection. They provide structure too. So that's why I'm making sure people see in this talk, both sides are going to evolve now, and they're going to co-evolve in this process. And we have to be aware of that, and we can be the bridge between those two sides. There's an opportunity to be the bridge.
Yeah. So leading drones, in order to thrive and allow others to thrive, we need our antennae right out there, picking up on the signals of what's working, what's not working, what structures are collapsing and being obsolete, which ones are staying strong, and for what reasons, and then kind of bridge that with the new and what the new needs, the new desires, the new ways of working together, so that we can find this harmony again. Because right now there's so much disharmony.
Mm-hmm. And again, we could work with that. And the opening up these options gives us opportunity. You know, if you look at the retail market in the United States was decimated, and the old model of Sears and stuff went out, and what replaced it? Amazon and Walmart. And that's the new ecosystem. So when something collapses, it creates space for something new.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff took advantage of, he saw the ecosystem of that area collapsing, and Jeff took advantage of it.
He's stepped down now, hasn't he? Is he not? He stepped down.
Now he is, but my point is back in the 90s and 80s or 2000s. And my brother knows Jeff. And anyway, the fact of the matter is he took advantage of an ecosystem that was collapsing, and he created a whole new one.
Mm.
So the fact of the matter is we have that opportunity now, because there are this whole this 1 year of COVID, which is 20 years of economic unrest, in fact, is opening up options for us to take advantage of. And that's one of the conclusions. It's not going to go away. It's not going to go back. It's going to keep simmering, so we have the next few years to recover from that breakdown and take advantage of these openings. Do so. And one of the major spots is the intersection point between the old and the new.
It's about being agile, opening our eyes, as leading dragons, be the bridge, and working together, and just keep working together, finding, because there's no manual to read from. So it's and when I say together, I really I love insisting on leveraging collective intelligence, because that's how we can really find new systems that work.
Mm-hmm.
And this sense of, you talked about one of the foundations of an infrastructure is community. So build our community, build our sense of self, and keep an eye out on opportunities where we can serve best.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So it was an honor to do the series. Much love to everyone.
Thanks.
Be strong.
Thank you so
and
much.
don't despair, but grow through these times. It's an amazing time to be alive. Take advantage of it.
It's an amazing. Yeah. Have you written your book yet?
Hmm?
Have you written your book yet?
No, even though I'm an author, I don't like writing to the mainstream. I just like helping people on a one-to-one basis, quite honestly. So yeah. I keep my life simple.
Well, Casey, I mean, you're not going anywhere at the moment. I'm not going anywhere at the moment. And who knows, there might be a hybrid series. I'll see if I can talk you into it. Mm-hmm. Or something else, whatever comes up.
Mahalo. So much love to everyone.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this leadership training during the Corona times. And take care, Casey.
Much care to you.